a.m. and has all of southern Florida preparing for the worst today, Monday, August 24th, 1992.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Catherine Currick.
And good morning. Welcome to Today. Good morning and welcome to Today on a Monday morning. As we greet you, we're going to go direct from Studio 3B to the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida, where we are joined on the line by the center's director, Dr. Bob Sheets. Dr. Sheets, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
What's the latest on Andrew's status?
Well, indeed, the hurricane just moved right across us. We were in the eye wall here with the building shaking pretty good for a while, and the building suffered some damage, but we're in good shape. As far as the hurricane is concerned, it's moving toward the west now across the Everglades. Will be threatening the southwest coast of Florida here in the next hour or so, and then move out over the open Gulf and be a threat to the north Gulf Coast up in the Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas area within about 2 days.
Once it moves out into the Gulf, does it figure to pick up in intensity? It's
pretty strong right now. We had at least a strong Category 3 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That means probably 130 miles per hour or maybe even slightly stronger than that. And then it's not going to weaken much as it moves across the peninsula, maybe 20 miles per hour, and then probably pick that right up by this afternoon. Its winds had been higher. There had been some speculation that it might even be upgraded to a Category 5. It does not figure to get to that level of intensity? It did not get that way before it struck this coast. Fortunately, the potential perhaps is there. 5s are very rare, but the potential may be there as it gets out into the Gulf. You talked about it coming ashore on the Gulf Coast, Texas, parts of Louisiana too. How far north, how far inland does it figure to do damage? Well, right now across the Florida Peninsula here in Dade County, I think that here in South Florida, Miami, I think the damage is probably substantial. Of course, we haven't gotten outside to see what's going on except around our own building. And then as it moves out here and then moves on toward the North Gulf Coast, that's about 2 days from now. It came in at high tide, we understand. Can you tell us anything about the rains and the flooding? Rains were no problem because it was moving so fast that I don't think we had any problem with there. The flooding around Biscayne Bay, we've heard some reports of about 8 feet or so, and so I'm sure that there was some water up on Key Biscayne, Miami Beach area. The wind damage in the South Dade area is probably going to be some substantial amounts. So, Bob Sheets, let's see if we can do a bottom line on this. Came ashore on the southeast coast, moving across right now on the west coast of Florida, figures to go out in the Gulf, perhaps will pick up intensity, and then in about 2 days threaten parts of Texas, Louisiana? That's right. As far as the center would likely move inland over the North Gulf Coast, the probabilities are about the same from Mobile across to the Port Arthur area. All right. Dr. Bob Sheets, thanks very much. Appreciate you being with us. You're welcome. Although any hurricane in which you're caught seems horrific, Andrew truly is. In force and in fact, it is one of the worst hurricanes of this century. NBC's Bob Hager is in Miami with more on that. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. Well, you could tell it was a big one when it came ashore here just before dawn, actually about 25 miles south of Miami over the community of Homestead, Florida, and there were gusts clocked up to 164 miles an hour. Phenomenal. The building where we rode out the storm, a cinder block building, actually shook. It was a dangerous, frightening storm. This is how Hurricane Andrew looked as the winds roared ashore. It was an awesome sight, a powerful storm reminiscent of the big Hurricane Hugo, which had done $5 billion damage in South Carolina 3 years ago. This morning in South Florida, power is out over a widespread area. Trees are down, buildings have been damaged. Yet there were some, like this homeless man, who chose to ride the storm out exposed to the elements. But because communications are intermittent, it's impossible to tell just how serious damage has been. It seems apparent it will be heavy. The governor has declared a state of emergency. The National Guard may be called out later today to begin the long job of recovery here. So now, as Bob Sheets says, we may be back here for the next couple of days if indeed Andrew heads back out into the Gulf of Mexico, gathers intensity there as it goes over that warm water again, and then threatens Louisiana or Texas. Brian?
Bob, I know you're in Miami, so you may not be in a great position to answer this question, but how broad an area of South Florida has been hit? Can you tell us that?
Yes, I think it'll go from here on down to the Keys. Not much north of Miami, but I think the main damage is going to turn out to be to South Miami, to, as we said, the Homestead area as well, over into the Everglades, and most of the southern part of Florida below Miami.
All right, Bob, we're hopeful that damage is just structural. Thank you. Authorities are hoping that their broad evacuation orders, issued well in advance of the storm, will minimize Andrew's deadly potential. More than 1 million South Florida residents were told to flee in the face of the hurricane, and as a result, evacuation shelters are jammed. NBC's Noah Nelson has more on that.
By early evening, the streets of downtown Miami were deserted, except for some of the city's homeless. They had ignored warnings to seek shelter from the coming hurricane.
What are y'all gonna do tonight?
Try to make it.
Aren't you afraid of what the wind and the water? I mean, the water's gonna be up over these things.
Well, if we get too bad, we just move up to high grounds.
Where you gonna go?
Anywhere we feel it's safe.
Even those who had been through hurricanes before were playing it right to the edge.
You're going to shelter.
Police units and buses were out offering those still on the street one last chance to come in.
We're here trying to help them, explaining to them they're not going to jail. We're taking them to a shelter, like a school, where they're going to be fed and they're going to be safe from the storm. However, they refuse to go. Those that refuse, we can't force.
No one had to force thousands of families who went to Red Cross shelters voluntarily. By midnight, many of the shelters were full.
It's not the most comfortable place to be, of course, but I feel safe here.
Yeah, great. Right now.
Look at the camera, boo.
The weather had become an equalizer. Vacationers from Germany, young women from Japan, and tourists from Argentina.
I don't know what is a hurricane because in my country it's not the hurricane.
You don't have hurricanes in Argentina?
No, never.
Many people accept the shelters as their temporary home, hoping they will have something to go back to once the hurricane passes. Noah Nelson, NBC News, Miami.
You heard Bob Sheets note moments ago that Andrew is making its way across the state. So even as Florida's southeast coast is being battered, residents of the state's west coast are preparing for Andrew's expected arrival sometime this afternoon. NBC's Henry Champ is in Orlando, Florida now with more on that. Henry, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. There are scenes like this all through Central Florida. Evacuees packing into school gymnasiums after they fled the Miami area last night to seek safety.
In Orlando, the hotel lobbies were jammed. Evacuees from South Florida escaping the fury of Hurricane Andrew, but unable to find rooms.
I called maybe about 20, 30 hotels, no vacancies.
They started coming Sunday afternoon, choking the highways north. By nightfall, the main streets of Orlando were jammed. The city has 80,000 hotel rooms. It's the site of Disney World. But that wasn't enough.
Orlando is sold out. There are no rooms in all of Orlando. We're just trying to find rooms right now.
Despite the warnings, most people left their departure to the last minute.
I made a decision that it's better to be safe than sorry and took my family out and came to Orlando.
Florida's north central communities set up special shelters, knowing exactly what kind of damage could occur.
Well, right now it's better than anything, because otherwise, if we hit the hurricane there, we live in a mobile home, it would have been dangerous.
It might have been this country's biggest evacuation ever. State police at one time were telling us that the bumper-to-bumper traffic coming out of the Miami area actually stretched for more than 100 miles. Bryant?
My goodness. Okay. Henry Champ, thank you. Florida's Governor Lawton Chiles has already declared a state of emergency because of the hurricane. Among other things, he's called up 1,500 National Guard troops, and we'll be talking with the governor in just a few moments. Before it hit South Florida, Hurricane Andrew battered the Bahamas with winds of up to 120 miles an hour and claimed at least 4 lives. No word yet on how many others were injured. We understand the trees were down and roads were flooded. And while Willard Scott has the morning off, we are joined by Joe Whitty, meteorologist. Joe, what can you tell us about the path that Andrew is on?
Andrew is halfway across Florida already, leaving Dade County, moving into Monroe County, which is basically Everglade country. And so there's not many people there, so that's good news. And probably within the next 2 to 3 hours, it will be out over the Gulf of Mexico, and over those warm waters will start to gather more energy, and then it curves up towards Louisiana, Texas by about Wednesday night.
I'm sorry, without being too specific or too technical, why does it necessarily gain energy when it's over the warm waters of the Gulf?
That's the source of it. It's like being on a hot stove, and a lot of that evaporation from the warm water adds the energy or the water vapor, and as that rises, it condenses, even rises faster because of the energy released by the condensation process.
And conversely, it usually loses momentum over land, but unfortunately there's not a lot of land in the state of Florida for it to lose momentum over.
That's true. It's going to cross Florida probably about 4 to 5 hours, so it'll be over warm water. And it passed over the Gulf Stream, which was a temperature of 86 degrees. And the Gulf waters are shallow. They're relatively warm, 86 degrees. They figure the water temperature of 84 degrees is sort of the critical line. If you have water warmer than that, then that's really conducive to firing up.
How broad an area of alert are we talking about along the Gulf Coast when we talk about it going up into Texas, Louisiana? How broad an area are we talking about?
At this stage, when we're talking about 36 to 48 hours ahead of time, we're probably talking plus or minus 200 miles for weather watches. But generally,
can you tell us from where to where?
Generally from around the Galveston, Houston area up through Mobile, Alabama, generally. But that's really 36 to 48 to possibly 72 hours away. So we've got a long time to track that and watch that very closely.
Could it be upgraded, Joe, to a Category 5 potentially, or not?
We have to watch it. Remember, Saturday morning, this was only a tropical storm, and then all of a sudden it blew up like crazy, and it was almost a 4. So that's an update on the hurricane situation. Let's go to the local forecast around your neck of the woods.
Is not having a real major effect on our area. We have some light showers moving west at about 25 to 30 miles per hour, and they could produce a few gusty winds, but overall, we're going to see partly cloudy, breezy weather with winds generally out of the east at about 15 miles per hour.
Much more on the hurricane later on in the program. And now here's Katie.
Thanks, Joe. Florida Governor Lawton Chiles declared a state of emergency yesterday. He's been monitoring the storm from the Emergency Center at the Florida State Capitol in Tallahassee. That's where he joins us from now. Governor Chiles, good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Can you tell us the latest from your perspective in Tallahassee?
Well, we have now entered a request for disaster declaration to the president. We sent that off at 5 o'clock this morning. We've, at this stage, asking for that for 3 counties, Dade County, Miami, Monroe County, the Keys, and Broward County and Fort Lauderdale. We'll probably add other counties to that. It looks like we did have in shelters over 650,000 people, so an awful lot of people were moved in this storm. We evacuated a lot of people out of the Keys. We had about 50,000 tourists down there, in addition to about 75,000 residents that we moved out of the Keys. So at this stage, you know, we're just sort of praying with our fingers crossed and waiting to see what the extent of our damage is. We know we've been hit by a very, very hard storm. Hopefully, you know, we've been able to get most of the people into shelters.
Do you know how many people, Governor Chiles, refuse to go to shelters? There are always some people who decide to ride out the storm in their own homes. Do you know how many people did that?
No, we don't know, and but we do want to send the word to, even though, you know, telephones are down now, and I doubt if they have TVs, but anybody that did stay should stay inside now. We've got an awful lot of power lines down. We have gas mains that are broken, an awful lot of glass. We're going to try to keep people in place until we can get in and clear some of those areas. I'm sure that there were those that stayed. We tried in every way to get them out.
I know it's very early and the hurricane just came in around 5 a.m., but do you have any idea on damages at this point in time? Are there any crews at all checking that out, or is it just too soon?
It's too soon. We know that we've lost a lot of roofs. We know that, you know, a storm that hits with 130-mile-an-hour winds, which we had, you know, has given us an awful lot of damage. When all your power goes out, when you lose those kind of things, you know that you've been hit very hard.
I know you've called in the National Guard. What will the role of the National Guard be, Governor Chiles?
Well, we have 3 battalions that are ready to start moving south now. They're engineering battalions. They will be working in cleanup. We have another 500 to 800 men that were in Dade County that are there. They will help make sure that we preserve order and that we protect areas. And we have others that, you know, will be on call. The federal government has assisted us very well so far. We have the ability now, through part of the order as to what has already been triggered, to ask for any medical help from the federal government. So it's been a coordinated effort so far.
All right, Governor Lawton Chiles, thank you so much for joining us. Mayor Xavier Suarez is the mayor of the city of Miami. This morning, he is at our NBC affiliate in that city, WTVJ, or outside our NBC affiliate. Mayor Suarez, good morning to you.
Okay, I heard you give a very nice introduction, but I didn't hear the actual question.
All right, all I said was good morning, so let me get right to a question. What can you tell us from your vantage point? You're obviously much closer to the hurricane than Governor Chiles.
Well, I'll tell you, I was the only car on the road on my way over here, and maybe it was a little bit foolhardy, but other than trees and of course some power lines and some roofs that we've heard about being blown off, the general shape of the infrastructure of the downtown area of the city certainly is good, and we don't know anything beyond that as far as damage assessment, but I think that in the main we have weathered this hurricane. As far as I can tell, the inner city. There are areas farther south, Homestead, etc., that we would like to hear more about, and we've been unsuccessful at trying to get too many reports from those areas. But Miami, certainly downtown Miami, and perhaps the surrounding neighborhoods, which are my particular jurisdiction, so far, other than a lot of trees in the streets and a lot of vegetation all over the place, looks reasonably in good shape.
Which is certainly good news, because the speculation was, as I'm sure you know, Mayor Suarez, that the city of Miami would sustain a good deal of damage from this hurricane.
I didn't entirely hear your question, but I know that, of course, being right next to Biscayne Bay, I don't know if that's what you were referring to. We expected perhaps a large surge of tide and of the seawater, and that apparently has not happened. There's no major flooding, and we were concerned for a metropolitan area of almost 2 million people. And although I can't speak for the greater Miami, the downtown area, the inner city neighborhoods seem to have made it through reasonably well.
Mayor Suarez, I know you spent the evening visiting a number of shelters. How are things going in those shelters?
Okay, again, I missed your question. You want to try to repeat?
Sure. You've been visiting shelters, I understand, throughout the night. How are things going in those evacuation shelters?
Well, the shelter situation was one of the best coordinated things, predominantly by Metropolitan-Dade County. Let me go ahead and extend the congratulations to them. They did a magnificent job. The one that I visited, unfortunately, is one in which the air conditioning was out, and yet the police and the firefighters and the volunteers, the Red Cross, were doing a magnificent job. There were about 900 people there. They were way over their maximum capacity, and I brought one extra individual who was a homeless, who refused to go anywhere else, or for that matter, refused to go with anyone else. And they managed to take him in, but there was just awful conditions. That was Dunbar Elementary, and I'll be going by there in a few minutes to see how things are, because I was really concerned about the heat that those people were enduring. And our firefighters are doing a magnificent job of trying to get air conditioning restored, and in the meantime they brought fans. But the shelter situation throughout Dade County has worked magnificently well. I'd like to compliment. Yes, ma'am.
But we're almost out of time. I understand that food and water is in short supply at some of those shelters. Is that true?
I'll try that again. I'm sorry.
Food and water is in short supply. Is that true?
Well, I know that they were appealing desperately for medical professionals of all sorts, and they did have a hard time at the beginning getting the food to the people, but I think ultimately they got them at least one good meal, and I think they're okay in water. And if not, that will be getting to them very quickly, because we've got water in the city everywhere, and we've got power in downtown, and I think that'll be easy to distribute that to them.
All right, Mayor Xavier Suarez, thank you so much for talking with us. Appreciate it. We'll be back in a moment to continue our coverage of Hurricane Andrew, but first, this is Today on NBC.
Listening to talk to Mayor Suarez about the shelters, we were understanding some of the reports were saying some of the reason why some people hadn't evacuated, concerned about their animals.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess if you have several pets, you're not allowed to bring all of them into the shelter. They're already packed with people.
That's devotion.
Right, back in a moment.
From WESH, this is 2 News Today.
Brought to you by Wet n Wild. Good morning, everybody. It's 7:25. I'm Claire Metz.
And I'm Greg Fox. Hurricane Andrew slammed into South Florida's coast this morning. And now the state's west coast is bracing for a hit. Jim Clark joins us live from the Weather Center now with the very latest on this powerful storm. Jim?
Well, Greg, we are looking at the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. They didn't give exact coordinates on this. They just said it was 75 miles southeast of Naples, moving to the west at 18 miles per hour, and the winds are 125 miles per hour. At least that's an estimate, very close to the center of the storm. I can put this series of pictures in motion for you, and you can see just exactly the way it's moving. It looks like it's going to go just south of Marco Island in about an hour and a half or so, and that could produce some damage there. The storm came in through just south of Miami. So far, we've heard reports from Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and they're saying the damage is not that bad, but that is over the well, they're not right on the coast, and they're also north of the storm. So I think when we get some coastal areas and around Coral Gables, the damage is going to be quite extensive. And our own weather, not too much to worry about here. A little breezy, some scattered showers.
Okay, thanks, Jim. You know, it's going to be a while before we can really assess the damage that Andrew wreaked on South Florida. Those folks who remained in the area were, for the most part, holed up in shelters weathering the storm, so they don't know yet what awaits them. However, these are some of the first pictures coming out of the Miami area. Obviously, strong gusts of wind blowing things that were not tied down all over the place, and even some of those that were tied down just popped away and are blowing all over. A lot of the buildings there, some structural damage.
It looks like some of them, though, are holding up pretty well. I mean, you don't see any major foundation kind of damage or anything of what you would expect: paneling, siding, windows broken and shattered. And this gentleman having quite a time with whatever he's trying to organize there. Looks like some boards.
Those are some of the wind gusts Jim talked about, up to 135 miles per hour sustained, and it may drop down just a little bit as it heads to the west coast. But again, a very powerful storm, and we have not yet been updated on any injuries because of the storm. Let's hope we're doing well on that status, and we'll have none.
Just a quick remander, you know, the Red Cross has been talking about all kinds of needs. A lot of people think clothing right away, but they're saying mostly food and money.
Right. Cash donations
really,
would be helpful.
Things, so contact your local Red Cross and they'll have information.
Take a short break and come back with Alan Edwards.
Meteorologist Valerie Voss, we watch a satellite view of Hurricane Andrew moving across South Florida now into Monroe County, affecting Everglades City with winds up to about 65 miles an hour at this time. The system has not lost a lot of its intensity, now down to 125 mile an hour winds, still tracking just about due west at about 18 miles an hour. The eye of this hurricane will pass to the south of Naples, Florida, but still produce some heavy rains and strong winds across that region. We'll keep you updated. Right now we go back to Ralph Wing and Kathy Marshall.
Valerie, Andrew, of course, being called one of the fiercest storms to hit the U.S. in decades, and we'll continue our coverage of its path and its aftermath. I'm Kathy Marshall.
I'm Ralph Winke. Stay with us.
South Florida faces the fierce winds and roaring tides. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Paula Zahn. Harry Smith is in Florida. We hope to catch up with him a little bit later on this morning. Right now, our colleague Dan Rather joins us from Miami with the latest. Good morning again, Dan.
Good morning, Paula. Wind gusts at 164 miles an hour, sustained winds of 138 miles an hour as Hurricane Andrew pounded Miami and the east coast of the southernmost tip of Florida this morning. It's estimated that ground zero, if you will, for this hurricane was Homestead, Florida, which, as everybody knows, is practically right on top of Miami. Now, at this moment, the wind continues to gust, a tremendous gust. Rain falls, it's coming down horizontally in Miami, but the hurricane eye is somewhere over the lower tip of Florida, roughly where the Everglades are. It's sustained winds are 120 miles an hour, gusts well above that as it's headed for Fort Myers and Naples.
Dan Rather, thank you very much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the morning. Time now to continue our coverage on Hurricane Andrew. The storm is now centered well inland over the Everglades in South Florida. The storm made landfall, as Dan just reported, at Homestead, which is just about 25 miles south of downtown Miami. It should continue on that line that should take it out into the Gulf just south of Fort Myers. Juan Vasquez joins us from Miami with the latest from there. Good morning, Juan.
Good morning, Paula. It's dawn here in Miami, and weather forecasters are saying that the worst is over. But as you can see, it's still blowing very hard, and we're going to continue to have high winds and rain for hours to come. These are the first pictures of damage from Hurricane Andrew. Trees fallen, a satellite dish at one television station crumpled, cars were crushed, and many buildings sustained damage. Just before dawn, officials clocked wind gusts at an incredibly powerful 164 miles per hour. It's too early to assess the full extent of the damage, but it's clear that it will be extensive. Forecasters say Andrew is one of the strongest hurricanes to hit the United States in the past 100 years. Nearly 1 million people in the path of the hurricane were told to evacuate their homes. The elderly were among the first to comply. Residents throughout South Florida have been told to expect the worst. Large areas are expected to be without water or electricity for at least several days. The power company says that 400,000 residents of South Florida are without power at the present time. By mid-morning, they're saying the storm should be over the west coast of Florida, and the forecasters say that it should increase in intensity as it hits the Gulf of Mexico, but they won't predict where it will go. Paula?
Juan Vasquez reporting from Miami. Thank you very much. We now go to Bob Sheets, who joins us from the National Hurricane Center. Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Paula.
What can you tell us about where the storm is tracking right now?
Well, it's probably centered fairly close to Everglades City, approaching the Marco Island area on the southwest coast of Florida, and it'll brush over the Naples area. So they're going to feel the impacts of this strong hurricane.
Is it continuing to pack the same kind of winds that it did when it hit Miami?
Well, of course, we haven't had any measurements over land. My estimate is that it's probably decreased maybe 20 miles per hour in its strength, but still a very powerful hurricane. Once it moves out over the open Gulf, that's going to happen just in the next few hours. We expect that strength to be regained.
What can you tell us about the threat to the Gulf Coast at the moment if the storm continues on the track we see it on now?
All of our numerical guidance indicates that it will turn toward the north. It'll go out over the open Gulf, then turn toward the north, and likely affect the Gulf Coast area anywhere between Mobile and the Beaumont Port Arthur area. So that's all of the Gulf Coast there. We'll be looking at that and probably be issuing some hurricane watches later today.
So it really is too tough to tell at the moment, too early to predict exactly where it will make landfall if in fact Andrew continues on this northward coast.
That's right. We'll have to see exactly what the impacts of this the Florida Peninsula has had on it as far as any track changes might be there, get a good handle on that, and then issue a hurricane watch.
Bob Sheets joining us from the National Hurricane Center. Thank you very much. Let's go about 60 miles north of Miami to a shelter in West Palm Beach where Regina Blakely is standing by. What's going on there this morning, Regina? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Paula, this is typical of about 200 shelters all over the south part of Florida. There are about 1,000 people who stayed here last night. Now, as was mentioned earlier, many of the elderly people were evacuated earlier, and many in the West Palm Beach area were brought here. This has also served as somewhat of a temporary hospital because many of those people were living in nursing homes and were very ill, and so they have been taken care of all night. But as you can probably see behind me, there are very many families here also, and people here are just wondering what they're going to return to when they step out. Now, the weather here in West Palm Beach is still fairly bad. As a matter of fact, I stuck my head out just a few minutes ago, and the wind was blowing at about 40, 50, sometimes up to 60 miles an hour with torrential rain. So these people are sitting here. They're very calm. Most of them are still very, very tired, and they're wondering what they'll return to when they go back home. Paula?
Regina, thank you very much. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Florida. We're now looking at 24 minutes before the hour. Time to check in with Mark McEwen, there we go. I think I have a hurricane in my mouth this morning for the latest on the hurricane and the rest of the country's weather. Good morning again.
I answer to all names this morning. This weather segment is sponsored by Gap, where the denim jeans are always just what fits. Let's take a look at the latest satellite picture that we have of Hurricane Andrew. And what you're going to see, well, we don't have that just yet. What it would show you is there it is. You see Hurricane Andrew down there. One of the oddities about this storm, if you go a little bit to the north there, as you can see up across where northern Florida meets Georgia, clear skies up there. But of course, you're seeing the brunt of the hurricane right coming across southern Florida. We have more to show you about the weather that's going on down in Florida. Let's take a look at this, exactly what's going to happen a little bit later on today. What is going to happen is the hurricane comes across. Hurricanes go counterclockwise. So as it exits Florida, you may see a surge in the seas as it is leaving Florida. So as you think that most of the trouble is behind you, with the way that the hurricane, the patterns run, east to west winds, you'll see maybe a surge of water there as well. We have more to talk about. As you can see, these are the rain amounts down in the Miami-Dade area, Dade County area down there. 5 to 8 inches of rain is what you're going to be seeing, the rainfall potential from the hurricane. You go a little bit further to the north, we're talking about the Tampa area as it lessens a little bit, 2 to 5 inches, and a little bit even further to the north, places like Old Pensacola, we'll see about 2 inches of rain. But as I mentioned, right to the north of there, clear skies, and they're having not a bad day, unlike what is going on down in the southern end of Florida. Keep in mind, we don't know exactly the exact pattern of the track of this hurricane, because we'll see what happens as it leaves southern Florida. But this is reminiscent of a hurricane that hit Florida back in 1926 on September 18th. And if this does keep that same track, which we will have to find out whether it does or not, that ended up hitting Mobile Bay and ending up in Biloxi. But we'll keep you posted on that. For the rest of the country, up in Montana over the weekend, they had snow, 6 inches of snow up in Helena. 95 degrees was a high there last week, 6 inches of snow on Saturday. It's been a very strange year for weather. Rain from Denver all the way up in International Falls out to the west, sunny and dry. That's a quick look at the national forecast. Let's take a look at your weather.
Good morning, I'm Pat Michaels. Hurricane Andrew has cut through South Florida with extensive damage in the Miami area, now heading into the Gulf of Mexico. For us here in Central Florida, the forecast, a tornado watch for Osceola and Brevard County. High temperatures today, upper 80s.
We will keep you up to date on Hurricane Andrew all throughout the morning. Paula?
Actually, Mark, I have a quick update now. Thank you very much from Florida Governor Lawton Chiles, who says Hurricane Andrew has hit the state very hard in his passage across Florida. He says the Miami area is littered with trees, down signs, torn up traffic lights, other damage. And the governor says Dade County is requesting 200 nurses to volunteer to help some of the injured people. We don't have exact statistics on the number of folks injured, but we will bring those to you as that information becomes available. We will have much more on Hurricane Andrew in just a moment. 19 minutes before the hour, Hurricane Andrew came ashore this morning in South Florida, packing winds of more than 150 miles per hour and forcing hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. Dan Rather is standing by with us this morning in storm-ravaged Miami. You were supposed to be on vacation. What happened, Dan?
Well, story calls, you know, Paula. Top wind gusts officially registered 164, sustained winds of 138 miles an hour as the hurricane slammed into Miami. Now it's moving across the lower tip of Florida, headed for Fort Myers and Naples. With me is Thomas Califano, who's the operations supervisor for AT&T. Give me a damage assessment. What's working and what isn't working after these winds of gusts up to 164?
What we can tell you now, Dan, is that our network is operating normally. However, we have a significant amount of power lines down in the entire Dade County, Miami area. There's probably better than 500,000 people without power right now.
Now, if someone's in another part of the country and wants to know what's happened to their grandmother, their aunt, their friend here, what should they do? What should they not do?
What we would encourage them to do, Dan, is to permit the calls to originate from this area so that all of the relatives can make it known to their relatives that they're okay down here, rather than flooding Florida with calls coming in from the rest of the country.
Now, you mentioned a lot of wires down, particularly power lines down. We know that water and wires are the greatest danger. Can you give folks some helpful hints how to get through this period?
The best thing to do, of course, while the eye of the storm has passed, we still have a particular period of time we need to stay off the streets as best we can, and of course stay away from any downed wires.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your help this morning. Appreciate all the help you've given to us. Well, I think it may be worth mentioning that this whole area, when we say this whole area, the whole southern half of Florida, in effect, is also under a tornado watch. Unfortunately, hurricanes almost always spawn some tornadoes, and so even though the worst of the eye of the hurricane has passed the lower Atlantic coast area, in the whole southern half of the state, people have to watch out for tornadoes.
The other thing you've talked about this morning, Dan, is the storm surge. Any update now on the kind of damage that is causing? I guess this hurricane came through at the worst possible time during high tide in Miami.
It did, Paula. It's too early, and it's going to be a while before we know. Keep in mind that the wind here, while we don't have 164 mile an hour wind gusts up, this is still a powerful and dangerous wind, and some of the water is still rising, combination of the sea surge, high tide, and wind-driven water. So it's just too early to tell. I think it is fair to say, though, Paula, that the damage along the extreme lower eastern coast of Florida is going to be immense.
We just reported that Florida Governor Lawton Chiles is asking for 200 nurses to volunteer to come to Dade County to help out with the injured. Are you hearing anything about the kinds of injuries people have sustained and how seriously injured they are?
No, Paul, I'd be reluctant to talk about that. We've heard reports, but we haven't confirmed anything. I think one thing to keep in mind, as you know, South Florida is home for many Americans age 50 and above. And in the early going, a lot of the concern was not so much injuries from the wind or even rising water or the hot wires that are around everywhere. It was from what I would call, the kind of illnesses sometimes brought on by stress and this kind of bad weather. But it may be a while before we know, one, whether anybody's been killed in this hurricane on the U.S. mainland. At least 4 people are reported killed in the Bahamas when it swept through there earlier. And it may be a long while before we know the full extent of injuries. Unquestionably, there have been some injuries, but the full extent we just don't know. The damage assessment will take longer. It's still eerie here, Paula. It's indescribable now as the dawn goes. Earlier we talked about the lightning lighting up the sky with turquoise and aqua colors that I've never seen in the sky except at hurricane time. But right now, if you get out on the street, the waving of the wind has touched off car alarms everywhere. And so these car alarms are sounding. Many trees are blown over, and the wind blew so hard that it actually blew leaves through the cracks of some doors and windows.
You and I have both found our...
This is a 6 News Hurricane Alert.
Ron Allen, nice to be with you again this morning. Mona is going to join us as we talk to Ed Trotsky. Ed is in Miami on the site of the current devastation that has hit that city.
And this is the first we've been able to see Ed since the hurricane began. We've just been able to hear you. Ed, how you doing? Maybe we'll be able to see Ed. We saw him just a moment ago and he disappeared. Okay, Ed, we can see you now.
Okay, hi Mona, hi Ron. For the first time we are getting some daylight here in Miami. The wind is still blowing, but not hurricane force winds anymore. We are starting to see some of the evidence caused by Hurricane Andrew overnight. To the left of me, hundreds of cars, their windows all wiped out by the storm. What happened, little tiny stones blew off the roof of the evacuation shelter here and went through the windows. Some of the evacuees are just now going out inspecting the damage. They are finding their cars full of water. Many trees in this area are down, trees into cars. There are tree limbs everywhere. Luckily, we're in an area where there are no overhead power lines, but overnight in the distance, we kept seeing, we saw power lines bursting and generators bursting, so we know that a lot of people are without power. This shelter has only emergency power at this time. That's the latest from Miami. I'm Ed Trotsky.
Ed, have you heard anything about injuries?
We haven't heard anything about injuries. One of the problems with that information is the police officers just in the last 15 minutes have been able to venture out for the first time, and they can't go very far. In fact, some of the officers, they had the windows blown out in their cars. And also, one of the damage estimates is going to come from police helicopters, but 2 of their helicopters were parked in the Tamiami airport overnight. The roof of that airport fell in. Those helicopters were destroyed. So it's going to be a while before we know about injuries and the extent of damage. The roads are closed. People are being told to stay put at this hour. Stay in the shelters.
You can see the violence of the wind wall against Ed. Ed, are you currently in the eye? Have both sides of the wall passed you?
This is the latter half of the storm passing us now. The eye, we never saw the eye here. We were about 15 miles to 20 miles north of where the eye passed. We believe it was a very narrow eye, perhaps only 10 miles to 30 miles wide, so we never saw the eye at this location.
We understand that our CBS affiliated station in Miami had its roof blown off and a satellite dish lost. Have you heard about that?
We've had some communication with them. We're told the general manager's office was wiped out, that there was extensive damage on the second floor there. They lost 5 satellite dishes there, and a lot of the stations in this area are in low-lying areas, and at one point all the stations were off the air. We know at least 1 radio station is on at this time.
Ed, in talking to your rescue people and your emergency and alert people, would they give you any idea of when Miami should have started evacuating? To take millions of people out would take, what, days?
Well, you know, that's what people have been saying for years, that there would not be enough time to evacuate everybody because so many people moved into the coastal areas. But then last night, the roads were not jammed leaving town, and people were wondering, hey, what happened? Was it everybody got out real fast and the evacuation was successful and did not take as long as forecasters had predicted for years and years? Or B, did a lot of people stay put? We don't know for sure. We talked to some people last night who planned to stay put, some condominium dwellers, in fact, who planned to stay on the 18th floor last night. They said if the wind got real violent, they would go down to a third floor stairwell, but that condominium was right on the beach.
Ed, the surge has already begun in that area, of course, in coastal areas, and it hit at high tide, did it not? And what damage in the immediate coastal areas did you review?
Well, we can't leave this shelter. The roads are closed, there are power lines everywhere, so we can't even get out to the coast. I don't think anybody can at this point. We expected the surge to roll right over Miami Beach, right into Key Biscayne. It's only a couple of miles wide, so we know that there is going to be a lot of water and storm damage out there, but we haven't been able to see it yet.
Let me briefly explain the surge to people, since we're using that buzz term. The surge is the wall of water that's driven into the shallows by the storm offshore, and when hitting at high tide, with that force of hurricane, it should be 10 to 12 feet high. With the high tide, it would be even higher, Mona.
Ed, can we see the 6 News vehicle from where you are?
They want to try to take a look of the 6 News vehicle, Jim. So if we can show you the satellite truck, we thought we were going to get some protection from the truck. Our vehicle is on this other side of this. This is right in front of it. We have a white station wagon here. The side windows are blown off of this, and if we can go over here in the other direction, you can see a line of cars here. These are the cars from the evacuees, and I don't know how you can make it out in this driving wind and rain, but the windows are blown out of all of those cars. And over there, right in front of those cars, there were a line of tall trees when we showed up here at the shelter last night, and all those trees are gone right now. They're just leveled. Some of them are sticking in the cars. A very eerie looking sky here in Miami.
What does the sky look like?
Well, when we woke up, it was like a blue and a green, and now it's turning gray, and we're getting more rain. Just what Miami needs.
That green sky, that's a hurricane sky. Ed, have you had an opportunity to communicate with any of the people regarding the economic impact on your immediate area?
Well, you know, no one will know that for a while. It's interesting. Some areas are going to have extensive damage. We've heard the Homestead area has extensive damage. South Dade area has extensive damage. But then up in North Dade, I talked by telephone to my parents a few minutes ago, and I got through on the telephone. So who can explain it? The power is out here, but the telephone is working, and they're okay.
I think we need to give thanks on this one that there is not just a flat body count coming out on this, Mona.
Apparently, Lawton Childs, expecting some injuries, has ordered or requested 200 nurses to volunteer to go to Dade County to help out there.
You need to watch Channel 6 as we move along with this coverage, because if there is a need for medical help, or if there is a need for any type of services that you might be able to donate, then we'll let you know. And Ed, we need to know, if you would please, are any of the major highways like I-95, has damage been done to any overpasses, bridges that you know of?
We just don't know. We just don't know. It's too early to tell. Everybody's been told to stay put, and I'm told we're about to lose our signal here.
Let me ask you one last question. Did you feel like you and our crew was in imminent danger?
Well, I felt this shelter was very safe.
We're losing Ed right now. We'll get Ed back as soon as we can. Mona?
We thank you for joining us, and we'll keep you updated at any moment that something happens you should know about. Meanwhile, we plan to see you at 8:25. Thanks for joining us.
PBS This Morning, here's a look at your weather.
Good morning, I'm Pat Michaels. Hurricane Andrew has cut through South Florida with extensive damage in the Miami area, now heading into the Gulf of Mexico. For us here in Central Florida, the forecast, a tornado watch for Osceola and Brevard County. High temperatures today, upper 80s.
At 4 minutes before the hour, we go back to Miami, where we find our colleague Dan Rather standing by, and Harry Smith joining him as well. Harry Smith driving through the storm all night. I don't know, Dan, is he mic'd up yet so he can tell us what he saw?
Not quite, Paula. What Harry Smith has done is drive from the Palm Beaches area down southward, just arriving here in Miami. The situation is, if you take a look at the map, The worst of the storm damage is going to be 30 miles, roughly 30 miles north and 30 miles south of Miami. That will be the worst of it. If you look at the map and you're saying, well, I want to know where the most damage is, that's one way to do it. Now, the main part of the storm, the eye of the storm, has left Miami. Still plenty of wind, rain, and water here. A lot of wires down, a very dangerous situation. But Fort Myers and Naples are next to be hit. That is expected to happen within the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours at most. And then the storm is expected to be out in the Gulf of Mexico in about 2 hours. Harry, when you drove down south from the Palm Beaches area, what did you see?
Lots of good news. Maybe some trees down, a lot of traffic light signals that have crashed down to the ground. But the good news is not too much damage.
Paula?
Thank you both. Harry Smith, Dan Rather. We'll be checking in with both of you in a little bit. We'll be right back.
This is Daybreak with Kathy Marshall and Ralph Winke sitting in for Leon Harris at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
Good morning. Hurricane Andrew is moving westward across South Florida at this hour. It has been on land for more than 3 hours now, and we're getting the first pictures showing the storm's strength and initial damage. CNN's John Zarella has been covering Andrew through the night and joins us now with the very latest. And John, I take it you're still holding your ground there in Miami.
We held our ground all night. No reason to give up now when we're about on the outside of the worst of this storm. Certainly are. You can see now some of the damage that the storm did here in North Miami area. Most of what we have here are the downed trees, which literally snap like twigs. The storm was a relatively dry hurricane, I guess because it was so tightly wound, such a small storm as far as its diameter, and was moving fairly quickly. We're going to try and walk around a little bit, and while we do that, we have some pictures that our crews brought back just a little while ago from very early morning, just before daybreak, perhaps around 5:30, 6 a.m. And you can see from those pictures that it was still quite intense. Most of the damage was relatively confined to downed trees in this area, awnings that are off. Doesn't look like there's any structural damage up here. We're walking a little bit down to another side of the building where the CNN offices are, and you can see that there are more downed trees, literally snap like twigs. The gates to the office building were ripped off. I guess you could consider that structural damage. The entrances here to the exits are completely blocked off, and so there's no way for us to move our satellite truck at this point until we can get this tree trunk moved out of here, which isn't going to be anytime soon, I don't think. It's periodic now, the gusts of winds. It's not anything like it was even an hour ago, so it's very noticeable, maybe 50, 60 mile an hour gusts now at times, and then it lets up like it is now. Throughout the morning, the crews now, to give you an idea of where our crews are, they're heading down to South Dade County to see what the damage was down there, which is where the real central core of the hurricane hit. Another crew is over on South Miami Beach, where they may have experienced some storm surge. We'll try to get you those pictures just as soon as possible. The pictures that you are seeing, if you're still on that, are the pictures that you saw a few moments ago. We're just in this general area of North Miami, which was, to put it in perspective, about 30 miles north of where the core of this hurricane hit. Now, any estimates of damage way too premature. It may well be that this storm was so tightly wound and so compact that massive damage was confined to a 10, 20, 30 mile radius right around the center of the storm. It will be interesting as crews begin to get out, we begin to figure out where we are here, what damage there was north in the Lauderdale area, what damage there was down in the Upper Keys. Certainly over in the west coast now of Florida, they're going to be getting the brunt of the storm anytime soon. Kathy?
John, do you sense there from your vantage point that it's okay for residents to venture out now and be checking damage? Do you see anybody else out?
Nobody's outside yet, and frankly, I think most of the areas that we were in, most of the people probably evacuated. It probably is still not a good time to get out. Although the power lines didn't come down here, that doesn't mean they didn't come down in other places. Overnight, we saw huge explosions, just like I recall seeing in Hugo in the distance from Charleston, which was in the distance, just the transformers exploding. And we could see those standing here looking to the east over to Miami Beach. So very likely and very possible that there are power lines down over there. They're likely that the power's off. They're probably not live wires, but there's certainly no sense in taking a chance. Wind like we're experiencing right now, if somebody's up on a roof trying to survey his damage, he could get knocked off that roof. So certainly a lot of times death, injuries come in the aftermath of a storm when people try to get out too prematurely. I think we're still a couple hours away from starting to see any activity here on the streets. Kathy?
And John, certainly quite a contrast in the wind speed there than we saw an hour ago when we spoke with you. You were literally being blown over at that point.
Exactly, and what we're seeing again now is just that periodically we'll get a squall that'll move through here. But we're literally, I think, on the very outer edges of the backside of Andrew, so that the winds will now begin to drop off very, very quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if in an hour or two, well below even tropical storm force here. And the sun may even come out here well before noon today.
All right, thank you, John. And certainly, as you mentioned, a time for residents there still to be very careful. John Zarella reporting live from Miami.
So as you can see, while the violence of the storm is subsiding in the Miami area right now, it continues its march across the state, heading to the west coast of Florida and eventually to the Gulf. For more on that, what the storm is doing and where it's heading, let's go to our senior meteorologist, Valerie Voss. Val?
Ralph, it's very interesting that even without a radar depiction like we have, John Zarella has pretty much hit the Miami situation on the head. He's calling for a couple of hours yet before things are clear. And what we're looking at are feeder bands around this system as the eye moves westward. You see this feeder band that is just now out to the east of Miami. We expect that that'll move through within the next couple of hours, produce some more blustery winds and some more rain. And then it looks like the edges are within sight for Miami, just some lighter rains for perhaps an hour or so, hour or two after that. The eye, though, is now moving into Monroe County in the region of Everglades City. It'll affect Marco Island and Naples, and then it will move out into the Gulf of Mexico within the next couple of hours. The whole system has not diminished too very much. At the time it moved onshore, it was supporting sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. They are now at about 120 miles an hour, and the system still moving directly to the west at about 18 miles an hour, as it has done since it moved onshore about 3 hours ago. Rainfall totals, as you heard someone say, I think it was John, have been rather light. Our forecast was for 6 inches across South Florida, and some areas probably did see that, but that is a minimal amount for what a hurricane can produce. And of course, over South Florida, especially the Everglades, a swampland, they can handle that amount of rain quite easily. So at least the rainfall will not produce a lot of serious problems with this Hurricane Andrew, but the storm surge was expected to be anywhere between 7 and 12 feet. And of course, the hurricane made landfall right around Homestead, Florida, right at the time of high tide, about 5:01 a.m. local time, and consequently that storm surge up just a little bit from what it might have been at a different time of day. We, of course, will continue to watch this system as it moves out into the Gulf of Mexico, and in fact, we're going to be watching it for days, because the general trend, the way it looks right now, is for Hurricane Andrew to re-intensify in the Gulf of Mexico and aim in the general direction of Louisiana or Texas. We will keep it in sights. We go back now to Ralph Wenge and Kathy Marshall.
Thank you, Val. As she just said, storm now on its way to the west coast of Florida, a number of communities in its path, among them Marco Island. CNN's Bill Delaney is there. He joins us on the phone right now. Are you feeling anything yet, Bill?
Yes, Ralph, we sure are. It's consistently been increasing for the last half hour. We were feeling pretty good about ourselves about an hour ago. There wasn't much happening. That's changing quickly. This wealthy enclave, Marco Island, a condominium community. We're on the southern tip of the island. An evacuation order was issued for this place yesterday, and indeed, most people seem to have left. We've seen a few cars cruising around. As you know, the storm is being predicted to hit this place full force in about an hour or two, but with considerably diminished winds from what hit the east coast of Florida. Sustained gusts here aren't expected to go much into the Category 2 area, which would be above 90 miles an hour. It's perhaps indicative of the power of this storm that the officials here have reacted with measured relief that they're only going to be hit with a Category 2 as compared to the much higher winds on the other coast. They are not expecting widespread damage. The eye is expected to pass about 40 or 50 miles below here, south of here, in the next hour or so, as I said, with storm tides maybe reaching 3 feet here on Marco Island. So at the moment where the palm trees are bent over, there are white caps on the water, and there's no one around. We did see one large flash in the distance about a half an hour ago, which we presume was a power station of some kind. But at the moment we're sitting in perhaps 50-mile-an-hour sustained gusts, a lot of rain, and we're waiting to see what happens next. Ralph, Bill Delaney reporting live here on Marco Island.
All right, Bill, thank you very much. We shall keep in touch throughout the day. Coming up on Daybreak, we're going to bring you more coverage of Hurricane Andrew. We'll also examine France's public health program. What happens when normally free government care carries a price tag?
Also, we'll take a look at a creature who's seen some better days, but it's helping scientists get a clearer idea of the Ice Age.
And we'll focus on the strange love-hate relationship between Hollywood and Washington.
Well, the latest information is that the Weather Service expects the eye of Hurricane Andrew to be back off, having moved through Florida, the lower part of Florida, back off the west coast of Florida within about an hour. That means that the area below Fort Myers, Florida, Fort Myers and below, that would include Naples, Florida, should be about now catching the part of the hurricane that it's going to catch. This hurricane, as it came in from the east, as it came in off the Atlantic, had gusts 164 miles an hour, sustained winds of 140 miles an hour. As it hit land, it began to slow, was down to sustained winds in the 120 to 125 miles an hour category. That's roughly where it was the last time that we had it. Any real report on it, we expect that Naples and the Fort Myers area will be catching whatever they're going to catch very soon now, and within an hour, maybe an hour and a half, it will be back out in the Gulf of Mexico, and then we'll see whether it reforms.
There's a dramatic difference in the weather conditions, obviously, from when we checked in with you about an hour ago. What kind of gusts do you continue to get hit with there in Miami?
Well, the gusts in Miami continue to be, in gusts over 100 miles an hour, we're told. They'll begin to subside almost immediately. And Paula, as you know, Harry Smith drove down from the Palm Beach area, and I like to tell people what they can't see on television. When it was still dark, when this storm hammered in here, we saw in lightning flashes tropical aqua, sort of fuchsia colors. The power lines down, they'd be these great flashes of green in the sky, and the roads became green from all the pine needles and all the leaves down. Now, Harry, did you see that along the road?
It was really eerie. We came across from Fort Myers about 3 o'clock this morning, and especially through the cane fields, as you'd see those incredible explosions, it was an almost otherworldly like experience.
We're going to take a commercial break. Be back with more of CBS News coverage of Hurricane Andrew after this.
Here's what's ahead on our community calendar. Florida's state budget and taxation will be the topic at the membership luncheon of the Mount Dora Chamber of Commerce. That's Wednesday at 11:45. The state director of the Independent Business Federation will speak. Congressman Bill McCollum speaks to the Institute of Management Accountants Tuesday night at 6:30 at the Sheraton in Maitland. And registration Wednesday and Thursday at the Hamilton Holt School of Evening Studies at Rollins.
At 21 minutes after the hour, time to check in with Harry Smith, who's been up all night long tracking the storm in a car. Good morning.
How you doing, Paula?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
We're doing great. It really hasn't been bad. We left West Palm, where we were stationed earlier this morning, about 5:30. Came right down the coast to just north of Miami, where we are right now. I want to re-rack those pictures that we showed you earlier. There's a lot of this kind of damage, all on either side of the highway. power outages on a lot of power outages from West Palm all the way down to North Miami, and I guess the good news is that we didn't see more extensive damage. There were times when we would get where the road was more exposed to the coast, and you could feel some real significant winds coming in, but it isn't too bad. We're going to get out on the highway again here pretty soon and see what else we can dig up for you and try and get it on a little bit later on this morning. Paul?
All right, we'll be back with you in a couple minutes. Right now, at 22 minutes after the hour, we have to take a break from right here. Our coverage of Hurricane Andrew will continue.
Good morning. It's 78 degrees. I'm Ron Allen.
And I'm Mona Scott. And of course, our top story at this hour is Hurricane Andrew. We've been following the storm all night and into the morning.
South Florida is still feeling the fury of the hurricane. 6 News reporter Ed Trotsky is in Miami. Here is his latest report.
You can see a line of cars here. These are the cars from the evacuees, and I don't know how you can make it out in this driving wind and rain, but the windows are blown out of all of those cars. And over there, right in front of those cars, there were a line of tall trees when we showed up here at the shelter last night, and all those trees are gone right now. They're just leveled. Some of them are sticking in the cars. A very eerie looking sky here in Miami this morning too. Well, when we woke up, it was like a blue and a green, and now it's turning gray, and we're getting more rain. Just what Miami needs. It's interesting. Some areas are going to have extensive damage. We've heard the Homestead area has extensive damage. South Dade area has extensive damage. But then up in North Dade, I talked by telephone to my parents a few minutes ago, and I got through on the telephone. So who can explain it? The power is out here, but the telephone is working, and they're okay.
Ed Trotsky in Miami. 6 News reporter Shepard Smith is in Fort Myers and says right now they're going through a nasty part of the storm.
Yeah, I'm Shepard Smith reporting from Fort Myers. We are driving from what has been our perch atop Wink TV, headed south into Collier County, where the brunt of this storm by the West Coast scale should be. We can tell you that we've left what was probably tropical depression sort of winds. We're moving into what is more like tropical storm, and the further we head south, the worse the situation becomes. Now, the storm has been downgraded. The winds are not going to be as strong as had once been feared on this coast. However, Collier County could feel 90 to 95 mile-an-hour winds within the next hour to 2 hours. We are headed to the beach on Collier County to show you up close and personal exactly what is happening there. We are expecting quite a sight. We'll have it for you later on 6 News. Until then, I'm Shepard Smith on the southwest Florida coast.
Back at home, Hurricane Andrew is really taking its toll. 6 News' Linda Hurtado is in Cocoa Beach with the latest.
Well, I took my rain gear off because it's simply a beautiful day here in Cocoa Beach. We're about 200 miles north of where the storm hit, and the only thing that we've really suffered here at Cocoa is we've had some rough winds, and the surf is up. It was about 6 feet at one time, but now the tide is going out, and at this point it doesn't look like we're going to suffer any damage or any erosion. The only sign of a storm we had was about an hour ago. We had a squall line come in, we had some rain and some wind. Other than that, no sign of a storm here. Back to you.
Thanks, Linda. Time now to go to 6 News Weather Center, where Pat Michaels has our latest on the storm and a quick look at today's forecast. Pat?
Hello, guys. Good morning. We have the latest information and satellite pictures. We just got this off the wire here. Let's take a look at the satellite loop. The storm, this is a little old, but the eye is moving to the west, as you can see. The center of Hurricane Andrew is over extreme southwest Florida. Let's take a look now at the satellite out of West Palm. The reason we're getting it from West Palm is Miami is down. Literally, the radar unit has been blown off the top of the building there. The center of the eye, 170 miles south-southwest of Melbourne. If you want to give it a close relationship to here, it is about to move into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, we'll have to tell you that it could re-strengthen. Now, winds are down. We don't have a reading of the winds right now. It has fallen apart, basically, but should regain its strength. We'll have a forecast of that at noon today as to what we think we're going to do. Forecast today for Central Florida. We're looking at low 90s to upper 80s today. There's a tornado watch in effect for Osceola and Brevard. Let's take a look at traffic now. Susie Cerrone is standing by. Susie, how's it look?
Well, thanks, Pat. In our neck of the woods, I-4 westbound is busy, but up to speed out of Seminole County. Turkey Lake Road southbound, well over a half-mile heading in towards the Dr. Phillips High School area. That's located about a mile and a half to the north of Sand Lake Road. I'm Susie Cerrone for the K92 FM 6 News Traffic Watch. Now back to Mona and Ron.
Thank you, Susie. That's our news to this moment. Join us at 6 News at noon.
See you then.
The devastating winds of Hurricane Andrew hit full force in South Florida. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Paula Zahn. My partner, Harry Smith, is in Florida, as is our colleague, Dan Rather, who joins us now from Miami. Good morning again, Dan.
Good morning, Paula. The fiercest hurricane ever to hit a modern, urban, coastal community has swept through Miami. Wind gusts up to 164 miles an hour, sustained winds of 140 miles an hour as it came through Miami roughly about 2.5, 3 hours ago. Now it's bearing down on the area of Fort Myers, Florida, and below. We have no real picture of how extensive the damage is, other than to say the damage is going to be huge, given the wind velocity and the rising water. We have no indication of how many people have been injured. We have no reports of any deaths as yet. On the mainland U.S., 4 deaths reported in the Bahamas. Now, we have fresh pictures from the Miami Beach area as the hurricane came in. Reporter Mike Kirch of WINK-TV in Fort Myers took these pictures on Miami Beach. I think Mike Kirch is up where we can talk to you. Mike, are you there?
At about 3, as early as Andrew's wake-up call started as early as 3 o'clock this morning. Winds are gusting through South Miami Beach right now at about 70 miles an hour. Do it again? That was good for me. Oh, you can see though. Let them speak for itself. In 3, 2, 1. Andrew's wake-up call started as early as 3 o'clock this morning. You can see the damage here. Wind gusts from South Miami Beach right now about 75 miles per hour.
Well, that's a reporter Mike Kirch of WINK-TV at Miami Beach. Let me position you here where we are. We're just north of the Miami city proper. Miami Beach is in that direction. The west, Fort Myers and Naples, which are catching most of the storm they're going to catch right about now, is far in that direction, and the city of Miami is right back there. Now, the question at the moment, we keep coming back to this, is what does the storm do now? It's due to be back out over the Gulf of Mexico in about an hour or an hour and a half, Paula. And as we keep pointing out, the storm is not yet finished in Florida, but it's really swept through here in a hurry, which is typical for these sort of tight hurricanes of the sort that Andrew is. I want to remind people time and again that hot wires and rising water are the biggest danger and will be for some little while. There are an awful lot of power lines down in this area, and particularly in the center city area where Miami, where CBS News correspondent Juan Vasquez is now. Juan?
Dan, as you said, we're getting our first look at the extent of the damage in Miami, and as forecasters predicted, it does seem to be extensive. Most of this damage occurred just before dawn when the strongest winds of Hurricane Andrew swept through the area. The National Hurricane Center clocked one gust at 164 miles per hour. Highest sustained winds 140 miles per hour. A major hurricane by any standard. The result is evident on the streets. Power lines down, trees uprooted, homes and commercial buildings damaged. There is debris all over the streets. Some of Miami's major thoroughfares are blocked this morning, making it difficult to travel by car. Some of these pictures were taken 10 miles inland, so the situation could be worse closer to the water. While the streets are still deserted, the wind is starting to subside on the east coast of Florida, but it's picking up on the state's Gulf Coast. We're still getting some rain, still getting strong gusts of wind here, but for Miami the worst is clearly over. The last word we had from weather forecasters is that Hurricane Andrew has reached the west coast of Florida with sustained winds of 125 miles per hour. Dan?
The one with sustained winds of 125 miles an hour over the west coast, that's the Gulf Coast of Florida. This is down from the sustained winds of 140 miles an hour earlier in the morning when it came in from the Atlantic side with wind gusts to 164. Now the good news is that it will soon be, the worst will soon be over for Florida, because the National Hurricane Center tells us now that the eye of the storm is expected to be back off of the mainland U.S. into the Gulf of Mexico within the hour. That's the good news. The bad news is the National Hurricane Center does expect this storm to rejuvenate. Now get the picture, if you will, folks. Nobody wants to overstate this, but it would be a mistake to understate it. This hurricane still has sustained winds in the 125 mile an hour range. That is a very big hurricane, and it's expected to rejuvenate and get its wind force back up when it comes back over the Gulf of Mexico. Make no mistake, if the hurricane, once it gets back out over the Gulf of Mexico, as it's expected to do, begins to rejuvenate, this will be a big, dangerous killer on the loose in the Gulf of Mexico. And Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, perhaps even the upper coast of Texas would be potentially in its path. When the hurricane gets back over the Gulf, Paula, anything can happen. You know, these things are really weird. They can go sort of wacko once they pass land. Nobody is predicting this, but it could even do a kind of a loop-the-loop and come back on the north coast of Florida. But let's tell you what we know. The eye is expected to leave the Florida coast, go back over the Gulf within the hour. Now, a lot of people are going to be without power, without lights, without, for that matter, medical attention for a long while here, even in the Miami area where the worst of the storm is over. And to put that in perspective, we go to Giselle Fernandez, who's at the Florida International University. Giselle?
Hi, Dan. We're going to have a tough time talking to you because I'm having a tough time hearing, but I'll tell you what I can. The worst, as you say, maybe over here in the Miami area, but Red Cross officials are asking that evacuees stay put and that they not go out until the all clear is given, and that they don't expect to be given for some time now because, as you can see, the wind gusts are still pretty strong and they say that it's still dangerous to venture out. However, as you can imagine, after a long, hot night, an anxious night of not knowing what was going on, listening to the howling winds and to the windows shaking pretty much, people this morning at daybreak finally got a chance to see outside and into the parking lot the immediate damage caused, cars with shattered windows and palm trees snapped at the trunks, and obviously they got very concerned about what was left of their homes and their neighborhoods. With me now is one of the many families who are in these shelters, John and Margaret Wall from Homestead, one of the areas expected to be the hardest hit. I know you've passed a very difficult night, as have many here with your children, 4 children. What is your basic plan of action? I know you're very anxious to get home to see what's left.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, right now we can't even plan because we have no idea what the damage is. You know, if we can just be cleaning up, I mean, we'd be thrilled right now. But we heard it hit pretty hard. The eye passed really right over our house as far as we know. And we just want to know what's happening.
News has been very limited. We've been having to rely mostly on the radio and some of the Red Cross officials here, and you've heard that Homestead Air Force Base was hard hit. A lot of the homes there demolished, so we're basically going on rumors, and that's obviously a very anxious feeling. Did you have home insurance and all those kinds of things to protect against something like this?
Yeah, we have homeowners insurance and flood insurance, and you know, we basically have a pretty sturdy house with security bars and cinder block construction, and we're just hoping that it held up.
Okay, well, time will tell. Again, the all clear should be given in a few hours, so we'll be able to see then and hopefully follow some of these folks home to see what kind of conditions they'll have to face in the coming hours. Dan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Giselle. The hurricane has mauled Miami and is now mugging the area of Fort Myers and below on the west coast. It'll rejuvenate once it gets out into the Gulf. Paula?
Dan, we'll see you a little bit later on this morning. I wanted to update you now on what Neil Frank, the former director of the National Hurricane, just had to tell us this morning. As Dan just reported, if Andrew keeps up its speed, it will hit somewhere between upper Texas and Alabama. It will, if it continues to build up speed and strength, will most likely veer towards land earlier this evening, more likely Wednesday morning. Neil Frank is giving it a 12% probability that will hit Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, or Galveston, Texas. That's the latest from the former director of the National Hurricane Center. Leaving the White House this morning, President Bush promised that the federal government would come to the aid of communities in South Florida.
I will be declaring today that Florida is a disaster area. There will be 27 agencies of the government then ready to help in any way that the federal government can help, and I will be in touch during the day to see that everything runs smoothly and that we do everything we can to help the people down there.
The president will be keeping an eye on events in Florida while on campaign stops in New Jersey and Connecticut later today. That's the news at 20 minutes before the hour. Time for one last weather look with Mark McEwen this morning. Boy, you've had a busy day.
Well, we've all had a busy morning, Paula. This weather segment is sponsored by the Disney Channel, the finest in family entertainment. And let's take a look at the satellite picture of Hurricane Andrew down in Florida. You can see here it is right here. Hasn't really moved too much in terms of what you're seeing from the satellite picture. Lots of coverage, lots of clouds, lots of rain. And we have a little strike potential map to look at here. Neil Frank was talking about this a little bit earlier. What you're going to see, of course, is Hurricane Andrew will be moving heading out into the western half of Florida into the Gulf Coast, and the chances are there, you see, this red area right here, the strike potential, that's where the hurricane is going to be later on today and later on this afternoon and evening. As the colors get a little bit lighter, then that's when it starts to, you can see where the path starts to deviate. With the orange areas, we think that that's where there's a good high probability that will hit portions of Texas into Louisiana, and as the lighter areas on either side, you can see that's where the potential starts to drop a little bit. But this red area is where this hurricane is going to be later on today and later on tonight. Let's take a look at what's going on in the rest of the country. Out to the west, where they've had those fires raging, what you're seeing is sunny and dry conditions up and down the west coast, rain from Denver up into International Falls, and in the northeast, what you're seeing are muggy conditions. Real quickly, for tomorrow, you're going to see places clearing up down in Florida. The wind will be strengthening tomorrow as well, or will be a stiff wind tomorrow after Hurricane Andrew does leave. This is still today's forecast. That's a quick look at the national forecast. Let's take a look at your weather.
Good morning, I'm Pat Michaels. Hurricane Andrew has cut through South Florida with extensive damage in the Miami area, now heading into the Gulf of Mexico. For us here in Central Florida, the forecast, a tornado watch for Osceola and Brevard County. High temperatures today, upper 80s.
Paula?
Thanks, Mark. Just about 18 minutes before the hour. Coming up next, in the eye of the political storm with Hillary Clinton and Tipper Gore.
This is CNN.
The wrath of Andrew is felt in South Florida. The season's first Atlantic hurricane moves in under the cover of darkness to extend its devastating grip. Daylight brings a clearer view of Andrew's destruction. Hundreds of thousands of evacuees may find out that they are victims. This is CNN's Morning News. Hello, I'm Donna Kelly. Bob Kane is off for this week. President Bush says he will declare a federal disaster today in parts of Florida hit hard by Hurricane Andrew. The storm is the most powerful hurricane to hit the United States in decades, and it is now lashing Naples and other communities on Florida's west coast. The hurricane caused extensive damage in the Miami area earlier this morning. Winds gusting over 160 miles an hour knocked down trees, tore off roofs, smashed windows, and caused structural damage to some buildings. There are no immediate reports of deaths or serious injuries, but power is out in much of the storm-damaged area, and communications are limited. After beating up on the southeast coast, Andrew headed across the Florida peninsula. It is expected to rush into the Gulf of Mexico shortly, crossing the coast near Marco Island. Now, Andrew has lost some strength during its 4 hours over land. It is now a Category 3 hurricane with top sustained winds of 125 miles an hour. Hurricane Andrew arrived at high tide about 5 a.m. Eastern, rampaging ashore at Homestead, Florida. That's just south of Miami. One of the first casualties, electrical power, and about 400,000 people are now without electricity. More than 1 million residents had been told to flee. About 700,000 of them complied, and about 75,000 people went to 4 dozen shelters in Florida. Hurricane Andrew came to Florida after tearing up the Bahamas, where 1 death has been confirmed. Outlying islands took the brunt of the storm, and Nassau was spared major damage. It's been daylight, of course, for a couple of hours now in Miami, and that makes it a little bit easier to see some of the damage from Hurricane Andrew. CNN's John Zarella is in Miami. He joins us now with a damage account. John, good morning.
Morning, Donna. As you can see, it is still pretty gusty here in Miami. The wind's probably still approaching 60, 70 miles an hour here. Periodically, strong squalls are still rolling through. So think of the fact that the storm is all the way out in the Gulf of Mexico now, or approaching the Gulf of Mexico, and what we're still experiencing here as the squalls go through. Certainly an incredibly powerful storm. You can see that there's trees down over here, and there's a 0 down here in the ground by the building we're standing in, which is the front of our office building. There's the 12,000, the 0 that fell off the side of the building. We're just now getting a chance to come around and get a view of the front of the building here. Trees are down all along this area, right just to the west of Biscayne Boulevard. you can see some of the tree damage. We're lucky it wasn't that bad. There's a police car. I guess we could probably get a shot of him. It's about the first police officer I've seen. He's just, again, all these trees here about to block our view of him. Earlier this morning, our crews were out on the street and got some of the first pictures of what this storm looked like about 5:30, 6 a.m. Just as the eye was passing over Homestead and down in South Dade County. Now realize that we're about 30 miles, if not more than that, from where the center of the storm hit. So think of the kind of damage here. Certainly it's confined to mostly trees, as you can see in some of that video that we've been showing you. It's a lot of wave action and some flooding, but most of the damage is fortunately very light here. We've got crews in South Dade County now gathering some of the latest video down in the Perrine area and the Kendall area where the eye of the storm went right through there. The National Hurricane Center, for example, is a microwave dish, we believe, or the radar from the Hurricane Center blew off the roof there last night. There's some structural damage around down in that area. But fortunately for the people here and the people north in Broward County, this looks to be about the extent of it, is this kind of damage. Now the beaches, we understand, were hit pretty hard. We have a crew down on South Miami Beach. For many of you who have been here, that's the old Art Deco neighborhood built in the 30s and 40s. We understand damage down there is quite substantial to some of the older Art Deco hotels and to some areas of South Beach, some of those hotels down there along Ocean Drive. Again, right in this area, not too much damage other than these downed trees. We don't see any downed power lines. Power is out. There's a restaurant down at the other adjacent building to ours, and it has this outdoor awning that covers the front, and half of that awning was blown over to our building. There are lots of windows that are out as we made a survey in both of the office buildings here. Our offices sustained water damage, but beyond that, fortunately, nothing else other than that. Donna?
John, have we been able to use the phones? You say that power is out to a lot of folks. Have we been able to use the phones, or people who stayed in their homes during the hurricane, have they been calling in to say whether they're okay or not?
We haven't gotten any reports from any of the people. I think it's probably a bit premature, at least here. I would suspect that most people who lived east of Biscayne Boulevard, which is just right behind me, did evacuate, and that was the mandatory evacuation line. And so the people that are still over there, I imagine they've still got their hatches battened down, because along the coastline the wind action is going to be even worse than this, simply because they don't have the protection of buildings like this around us. But no, we haven't gotten any reports from people. We did get a call from a flight attendant who was at a Holiday Inn down by Miami International Airport, and she told us that there were about 140 airline personnel there overnighting, crews that had overnighted on the last planes into Miami. There were some people that were injured by flying glass when windows on the first, second, and third floor of that hotel blew out. Minor injuries, nothing serious, cuts and scrapes and bruises, and those people were being treated as best they could by people that had emergency medical kits with them. Fortunately, so far we haven't heard of anything as far as reports of serious injuries or deaths. But I believe that the real massive destruction that we saw from this storm and even felt up this way during the course of the night, when we get those first pictures back from down in South Dade County, that's really going to tell the tale of the tape of how serious this was as it cut a swath right across South Florida. Donna?
Okay, John Zarella in Miami. We'll be checking in with you from time to time. Thanks a bunch. Right now we want to go to Marco Island. As you probably know, Hurricane Andrew is heading west across the Florida Peninsula toward that area, and our correspondent Bill Delaney is there. Bill, bring us up to date.
Well, Donna, what's changed in the last 20 minutes or so is that trees that were losing pieces of themselves half an hour ago are now being uprooted. The National Weather Service continues to report that sustained gusts on this side of Florida aren't expected to go much above 75, 80 miles an hour. That's a report I heard in the last 10 minutes or so. I'd like to caution people that what we're feeling here down on the southern tip of Marco seems to me, with a little experience with these things, these winds seem to be a little higher than that. I attempted to go out and do a little work in front of the camera, stand up in the wind, and couldn't do it as recently as 15 minutes ago. A window in this condominium here where we have been sheltering, a window in the lobby, just blew out about 10 minutes ago, not long after our producer had just left the area, so we're glad that he got away because there was quite a crash of glass. There are a few people upstairs in this condominium development where we are here on Marco Island. We've been trying to get up to talk to them. We've been unable to. Obviously, the elevators are out, and we have not been able to get into the lobby because the doors are all shut with the pressure. And along with the flying glass, it's making for a pretty dangerous situation. Again, just to caution people not to take Andrew for granted over here on the west coast, the Gulf Coast of Florida. Bill Delaney reporting live, Donna, on Marco Island.
Bill, before you go for a quick second, can you tell us, has the National Weather Service told you what time the full force of Hurricane Andrew might hit there with you?
The last update I had on that, I understood that around within the next 45 minutes or so, we might be getting the full brunt of this. Now, the full brunt of the storm, the most intense part of the storm, is supposed to pass 40 or so miles south of here, south of Marco Island. The eye of the storm is expected to pass more or less 30, 40 miles south of Marco Island. So, again, in this populated area here near Naples, the storm is actually a little less worse than it will be farther south in less populated areas. But certainly Andrew seems to have skidded across the Everglades, not losing much of its punch.
All right, Bill Delaney from Marco Island, thank you very much for the information. Coming up, we're going to be talking to an insurance expert, and we'll see how you can file claims as we look ahead as Hurricane Andrew continues. We'll take a break right here on the Morning News. Back in a minute. Joining us on the air right now is Max Mayfield. He's with the National Hurricane Center out of Coral Gables, Florida. Mr. Mayfield, you were hit this morning. Can you tell us how much damage you've sustained and what's going on where you are right now?
Well, we did have some damage here at the Hurricane Center. The worst part, I guess, our radome on top of the building was blown off. The building was shaking considerably. We had a wind gust to 164 miles per hour, and I'm sure sustained winds somewhere 115 to 125 miles per hour here at the Hurricane Center. The center of Andrew now is passing off the coast. It's already moving. The center is in the Gulf of Mexico, about 45 miles south of Naples at this time.
Does that mean that Naples and Marco Island, that they're getting the full force of it now?
Yes, their main concern over there will be from storm surge flooding in the return flow as the winds come back from the west on the back side of the hurricane. They could have some storm surges of 5 to 8 feet.
How long do you expect that to last, to stay in the
Well, the good news is it is continuing to move towards the west at a pretty good clip here, around 18 miles per hour. So it will not allow it to build up, the storm surge to build up as high as would be possible if we're moving slower. That's the good news. Now we need to shift our attention also towards the northern Gulf of Mexico as it moves in that direction. We also think that it should start turning a little more towards the west-northwest during the day.
And as it goes out over the Gulf, is it supposed to strengthen?
Well, you know, it passed over the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula, so I really don't think that that's had too much of an influence on the strength of the hurricane. We do have another aircraft that's on its way to fly the hurricane right now, and we'll have some more detailed information. So I suspect whatever weakening occurred, I suspect that it will regain its strength once it's over the open Gulf of Mexico.
Mr. Mayfield, we want to let you talk to our senior meteorologist, Valerie Voss, right now. Val?
Max, hi. Forgive me, but I didn't hear completely what you've been saying. And of course, we've been watching the system move just about due west across the southern tip of Florida and out into the Gulf now. What are you saying about the projected path of this hurricane?
Well, we have a new advisory coming out here any minute now that actually does maintain this present motion for a while, with most of the day with a little more turn towards the west-northwest. The course of least regret, of course, is to go ahead and take it on the forecast track that we have, and I think we will likely put up a hurricane watch here momentarily for portions of the North Gulf Coast.
Can you give us a time frame on that? How long will it take to get to the North Gulf Coast? A couple of days?
No, I think the worst case would be within about 42 hours or so. So I think that's the reasoning for going ahead with a hurricane watch at this time, which will likely be from Mobile, Alabama to Sabine Pass, Texas. We just want people to know that there is a dangerous hurricane entering the Gulf of Mexico, and let them go ahead and be taking some precautions even now during the watch stage.
I thought it was pretty interesting that even earlier overnight, northeastern Mexico, Cancun, issued an alert for this hurricane. Everybody knows that it's going to be with us for a while. Thank you very much. All right, we'll keep you updated on Hurricane Andrew throughout the day today and perhaps for the next several days. Right now we go back to Donna Kelly.
And as we've reported, some 700,000 South Florida residents obeyed orders to evacuate their homes as Hurricane Andrew approached. Evacuations were ordered in 3 counties, Monroe, Broward, and Dade, which took the brunt of the storm. Thousands of people are still in shelters, as well they should be. Dozens of schools and government buildings were pressed into service to handle the crush of people. Some brought blankets and quilts from home to use as they slept on cots. Thousands of people traveled inland to places as far away as Orlando, staying with friends at hotels or in shelters. And a short time ago at the White House, President Bush said he'd proclaim a federal disaster area in affected parts of Florida.
I just very briefly want to express my heartfelt concern to the people of Florida on this devastating storm. Apparently it's one of the worst in 6, probably the worst in 6 decades. We have already got 2 FEMA teams, that's the government emergency teams down there in Florida. I will be declaring today that Florida is a disaster area.
In the Fort Lauderdale area, the Red Cross issued an urgent plea for food and water as shelters ran out of supplies. Right now, we're going to go to Boca Raton, Florida, where CNN's Gary Tuckman is covering the story from there. Gary, what do you have?
Well, Donna, a lot of people in South Florida have felt they were very lucky over the last few decades to not be directly hit by a major hurricane. But that luck ran out this morning when Hurricane Andrew came through, and it came through hard all throughout South Florida. The eye may have passed over Dade County, but throughout much of this area, hurricane-force winds were felt shortly after 5 a.m. Eastern Time. And even though the eye is now past, the conditions are still horrible here in Boca Raton, which is about 40 miles north of Miami. The winds are still very heavy. The rain is driving. We're about 100 yards away from the beach right now. The salt water's kind of blowing in our eyes right now, blowing us around a little bit, so you'll have to excuse us if we move around a bit. What happened here in Boca Raton, trees went down, power lines went down, light posts went down. The power lines are an especially big problem because they're in the middle of some of the streets here and they've been causing some sparks. Police have been trying to keep motorists away. As a matter of fact, police try to keep all people away from the beach area here in South Florida, especially in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. They started an evacuation yesterday. The evacuation continued to around midnight. At midnight, that's when the winds picked up very strongly. At that point, they closed the bridges that led to the mainland. The people who decided for whatever reason to stay here were stuck here. There's a lot of condominiums here in Boca Raton. A lot of people were on high levels of these condominiums, big glass windows, and some of that glass did end up breaking last night. So far, we've heard nothing about injuries or any type of casualties. We hope to hear good news about that later today, but there certainly is a lot of damage here in Boca Raton, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and of course, the Miami area. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live in Boca Raton, Florida.
Gary, I don't know, are you able to hear me?
I hear you.
You do? Okay, great. Can you give us an idea what Boca Raton is like? Are there a lot of elderly folks who live there? Are there a lot of tourists? Is it a big vacation spot?
Well, that's a big problem, Donna, here in South Florida, and that's why people were especially worried about a hurricane coming here, because the towns of Boca Raton and Palm Beach are both in Palm Beach County. They both have among the most expensive beach real estate in the United States, beautiful mansions in both these towns. And over the last 20 years, they've been building these mansions like they're going out of style, but there's never been a major hurricane that's hit this coastline. Well, the hurricane is now hit, and so many of these mansions are right next to the water, it's causing big problems. More inland, there's a lot of condominiums, and a lot of people have moved down here from the north. They've never seen a hurricane before. So you have a whole variety of circumstances and people that cause a hurricane to be a bigger problem than it usually is.
Right, certainly the concern there would be the evacuation of those folks. Gary Tuckman with us from Boca Raton, thanks very much. It is 20 minutes after the hour. Coming up on Morning News, we'll bring you more on the destructive path of Hurricane Andrew as we travel back one of the most powerful storms to hit the United States in decades. And for those whose property was damaged or destroyed by the hurricane, our guest will answer insurance claim questions during our call-in segment. We'll be back in a minute. People whose homes lie in Andrew's path, we don't have to tell you, it's safety first, deal with the destructive consequences later. The brunt of those consequences, no doubt, will be felt in the loss of property and personal belongings. When assessments of the damages begin to take shape, estimates could go into the billions of dollars. Our guest today, Robert Hunter, president of the National Insurance Consumer Agency, and he has some tips on how to file hurricane insurance claims. Mr. Hunter, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Donna.
What's the first thing to do for folks who find that they have a lot of damage out of the hurricane?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to protect your property. That is, if you had a window blowout or something, you want to make sure you protect any further damage. That's required by the insurance companies. It's something you should be doing anyway. It's common sense. Then you want to contact your insurance company and let them know about your damage. Now, it depends on the kind of damage, who you contact. The federal government sells flood insurance if it's flood damage, and your private insurer, through something called the wind pool, sells you the wind and wind-driven rain damage.
Is there a certain amount of time that could go by when they might say, well, I don't know if that was hurricane damage. Should you get to them as soon as you can?
Well, I think today there'll be an incredible rush of people trying to inform their insurance company. I think you just call them and say, I think I have damage. That's all you have to do at this point. Give them your policy number and so on. In the future days, then you have to figure out how much of the damage is covered. For example, a lot of these trees that are blown over are probably not covered except for damage that might happen to the house itself. It's mostly structural damage that's covered, and then contents damage that's covered, or your car, which also has to be covered under something called comprehensive coverage of your car policy if your car is damaged.
So you should maybe call your car policy folks if you think your car has been hit in the hurricane?
Yeah, if you have damage to your house, you're going to call your homeowner's policy people. If you have damage to your car, you have to call your auto insurer.
I'll tell you, there's one fellow who's going to have a trouble with that. I saw on the Wire report this morning that one man's car was lifted up in the driveway and blown through the living room of his house. I guess he'll have to call both of them and see who covers what there.
Yeah, well, obviously, in that case, both insurance companies would have to be contacted.
Yeah. Okay, now you go and you see the damage. Is it okay to start cleaning up some of the damage? Should you take pictures? What should you do?
Well, you use common sense. You have to clean up enough to live if you're going to stay in the house. You have to clean up enough to protect against further damage. That's required by your policy, and that makes common sense anyway. So you do common sense things right now. It's not bad to take some photographs to show the immediacy of the damage and to show, for example, the quality of your furnishings to help with the proof of what you had in your home.
Which is just what I was going to ask you. How else would you have the proof that you needed to show?
Well, for people, for example, that are up in in Louisiana and Texas where the hurricane may hit, they have a couple of days, it looks like, to prepare an inventory of their belongings. That's a good idea. Hopefully, a lot of people in Florida had that. If you didn't have that, it's a good idea to do that as the hurricane approaches. Take some photographs inside your house and make a list, particularly of stuff that's really valuable.
Well, there's an interesting point, too, that now, as they know that this hurricane is coming, what if somebody doesn't have insurance? Is it a little too late to call up and say, I need this quick?
I believe it's a 5-day waiting period for flood insurance for the federal program, as I recall it. I used to administer that. I don't know if that's changed, but it's probably too late to buy insurance now, but you should check with your insurance agent or insurance company to see if you have enough and if there's any possibility of increasing your coverage if you feel you don't.
How about the folks who couldn't get into a shelter of some sort and had to go to a hotel if they were evacuated out? Any insurance cover those hotel costs?
If there's damage to your home and you can't live in your home because of the damage, most homeowners' policies cover what's called additional living expense for those costs. In terms of an evacuation, you'd have to check with your insurance company. I would hope they would cover it because obviously insurance companies should encourage safety. Whether they will or not is dubious.
Okay, let's take a quick break here on the Morning News, and when we come back, we'll open it up to your phone calls. You can call if you have a question for Robert Hunter. Our number here is 404-221-1855.
Hey, we had power up until about an hour ago.
and they've lost a sign across the street, a flagpole, and some palm trees, but just some minor leaking. So we had an easy bit of it up here. This is North Miami area.
Car enthusiasts have helped send the prices of some classic Jaguars to astonishing levels. But the price of one is still very affordable, the 1992 Jaguar sedan. Introducing the Jaguar Super Leases, with lease terms so attractive, they make the Jaguar sedan beautiful from every perspective, including the financial one. Jaguar, a blending of art and machine. For your nearest Jaguar dealer, call toll-free.
Viper armed. Protected by Viper. Stand back.
Viper. No one dares come close.
For a brochure and a dealer in your area, call 1-800-365-2272.
Morning news continues, followed by World Day. After this local commercial break, next on CNN.
Save thousands on the 92s now at Higginbotham Chevrolet Oldsmobile in New Smyrna Beach. You'll have a ball and save a bundle on the 92 Geo Metro convertible. Air automatic, AM/FM cassette, only $10,982. For versatility, economy, and fun, the 92 S10 pickup, V6, AC, power steering, stereo cassette, Tahoe package, chromeware step bumper, only $89.88. Volusia County's first choice for over 16 years. Higginbotham Chevy Olds, US 1, New Smyrna Beach.
The Caribbean on cruise ships. Sometimes you just need to get away from it, all right? But these days, you got to be smart about it. With a Players Club card, you save 50% off your room, 25% off food and drinks, up to 50% off shows. The Players Club card. Have some fun the smart way.
New members get 2 free nights in Las Vegas or Atlantic City when the club books their flights. Call toll-free right now. There's no obligation.
This is CNN.
Welcome back. We are talking with Robert Hunter. He is the president of the National Insurance Consumer Organization. Our first caller this morning is from Florida. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hi, my name is Phyllis, and I'm calling from Dania. I've got a problem where my car, similar to your story, was blown into the neighbor's side of their house. It's left a very large gash, and my car, the roof is all flattened, and it smashed it through the laundry room of the neighbor. What do I do?
All right, well, the neighbor will have to get call their own insurance company, because that's obviously wind damage, so that'd be covered under their homeowner's policy. For you, you have to call your auto insurance company. If you have what's called comprehensive coverage, if you have a loan, you probably have it because banks require that. If you have comprehensive coverage, your insurance company would pay that less whatever deductible you have.
South Carolina, hello.
Yes. We're survivors of Hugo a few years ago, and one of the questions that I have, it took up to a month and a half, maybe 2 months, for a lot of people to get their claims back from the insurance company. Has the insurance industry learned anything from that, or do you think it'll still take just as long?
Insurance companies are trying harder these days. There's been a sort of a consumer revolt around the country against bad insurance practices. They're always tested at times like this. Hopefully they'll do a good job. The federal government also has to do a good job with its flood claims. I hope that they can respond within 30 days to proven damages. Obviously sometimes there are disputes that go on for years even, but I hope with routine claims they can do it within 30 days of the time of the filing.
Florida, your question, please.
Yeah. I was wondering what happened when, like, the llama.
I think that, Robert, maybe you can tell us if somebody has a problem, if they need to go to a hospital, if medical costs, how those might be covered, even if somebody suffers from some anxiety.
Well, again, it depends on your health insurance in that case. But the answer is yes. If you're hurt through this storm, your health insurance will cover you in most cases. If you have good comprehensive health insurance, you should go to the hospital if you're hurt, and they should respond, and your health insurer should pay.
South Carolina, your question, please.
Well, I have a question and a statement. One was the issue on the trees. Wouldn't a tree actually on a structure be covered, the removal that is, and the cleanup up to, in some cases, $500?
It depends on if it's damaged to the house. Yes, then the removal is covered. But if it's just sort of what the insurance industry calls I forget the word, but if it's just out there in your yard down, they're not going to cover it.
Okay, Florida, hello.
Yes, I'm calling from Tampa, and we have some property in Fort Lauderdale. My question is kind of regarding two properties. We have one on the beach, which is a hotel, and we have some rentals. We're wondering what our responsibility is towards the people in the rental and what will happen with our insurance on the money that we might lose for the month if the people can't live there, or the hotel during the time that the people cannot stay there.
Okay.
Well, if you presumably have business insurance, and business insurance quite frequently has what's called business interruption. If your tenants have to move out because of damage, the business interruption should pay you the rent or some percentage of it during that period of time. So you should be protected both from the structural damage by your insurance and for the interruption of business.
Robert Hunter, President of the National Insurance Consumer Organization, we thank you very much for the information.
Thank you, Donna.
Right now, morning. Hurricane Andrew is churning into the Gulf of Mexico.
Behind it lies a wind-blown, soggy path of destruction across southern Florida. This is World Day, and I'm Reed Collins.
And I'm Bobby Batista. Hurricane Andrew is paying a quick but devastating visit to South Florida. Andrew is entering the Gulf of Mexico now, 5 hours after coming ashore just south of Miami. South Dade County is believed to be the worst hit. Hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses are without power. But many of them are vacant, as nearly 1 million people were asked to evacuate ahead of Andrew's arrival, and most did. Those who stayed put endured winds as high as 168 miles per hour. CNN's John Zarella has been following the hurricane overnight from our Miami bureau, and he joins us on the phone now with an update. John?
Bobby, it is scaling down quite a bit now. The winds, though, are still gusting outside, perhaps just above tropical storm force strength, maybe 35, 40 miles an hour. That's about it now. It's calming down rather quickly here. Still some rain showers and squalls moving in over the area. Our reporters who have been out in the field are telling stories of boats that are up on some of the in some parking lots and on highways. But in the Miami area, at least North Miami area and many parts of central Miami, most of the damage seems to be confined primarily to downed trees. Now, that is certainly not any indication of what it is like further south in the area hardest hit in the Kendall area. It seems as if the swath that this storm cut a path through was about 10 or 20 miles wide, and around the core of the hurricane, that swath it cut was probably the most devastating. We have crews down in that area as well, gathering information and the latest pictures, but the folks that have been out on the street so far, as far down as places like Dinner Key Auditorium and South Beach on Miami Beach, again, much of the damage seems to be confined to boats that have been moved from their moorings, to trees that are down all over the roads, just one after the other after the other. But beyond that, fortunately, we are not hearing of any serious damage in this end of Dade County. And in Broward County to the north, it appears that the damage was even lighter than this, just some trees down here and there. And power, of course, though, is out all over Dade and Broward counties, which means no way to get gasoline, no way to... There are cars now that are on the road, and this is right now we're starting to see some traffic move on the roads here. So you can tell just by that very thought there, with traffic starting to move, that we can get around here. It's not as if we're completely cut off, at least in this particular part of Dade County. Bobby?
John, the damage is a lot less severe than people originally thought it would be, especially that from flooding. In fact, there wasn't as much flooding as they thought there would be. Why is that? Is it just the path it took? Or?
Well, it was moving fairly quickly, 16, 17 miles an hour. historically, it's that slow-moving storm, that storm that moves at 5-10 miles an hour, that lingers the longest over an area, that does the most destructive damage, that has time to dump the most amount of rain. The speed this storm was traveling, it just didn't have. It's very much like Hugo. They call these dry hurricanes. It didn't have time to dump a lot of rain. As far as the extent of damage, it was a smaller storm. It was intense, but it didn't cover a large area. The core of the hurricane, again, the eye was about 20 miles wide, so you had these core winds of 140 with gusts to 160 right around that 20-mile radius, but beyond that, it dropped off fairly quickly. So that was, I think, what could be attributed to the difference in the amount of damage here in North Dade County and what we may find as we move further south into the South Dade area. But those seem to be the logical reasons for why so little damage this far north. Bobby?
All right, thanks, John Zarella, weathering the storm from our Miami Bureau. Reed?
Bobby, as we saw from the radar image, the hurricane has now stormed across Florida and is in the Gulf. Newsman Bill Delaney joins us by telephone from Marco Island on the Gulf side with the latest. Bill?
Yes, Reed. I've just spoken to Leo Oakes, who is the director of the Collier County Emergency Management Team out here. We are on Marco Island, which is just south of Naples. Collier County, of course, part of Collier County. And what he is telling us that they expect the eye of the storm, the eye of Andrew, to pass just south of where we are here on the southern tip of Marco within the next 45 minutes. And indeed, just again, in the last 10 minutes or so, things have gotten a lot darker here. Looking south to the Gulf, we see these, it's very dark. The visibility is very, very low. It's kind of a great sheet of gray out there in the Gulf. Anything not tied down is being blown away. There are a lot of trees down here, power outages. They are bracing themselves as the storm passes out of Miami for some trouble in the next hour or so. They expect the worst of the storm is yet to come here in Naples, with a possible storm surge following the eye as severe as 7 feet. So again, in Naples, we have not seen the kind of monumental winds that there were on the East Coast. We have had sustained winds for at least an hour and a half now of 80 miles an hour, with gusts blowing well over 100 miles an hour, Reed.
All right, thanks. That's Bill Delaney, who is on the Gulf side, and that is the side apparently in which Andrew is now working its way. Let's get a progress report on the hurricane's path now. CNN senior meteorologist Valerie Voss. Valerie?
Reed, as you can see from this view, a sequence hour by hour of Hurricane Andrew. It has moved across South Florida and is very close to being south of Marco Island at this time. Because of its rapid movement, not a lot of heavy rain, although the forecast through the region still for 5 to 8 inches of the southern half of Florida, some sections of central Florida. There are still hurricane warnings in effect along the west coast of Florida, although they have been discontinued along the east coast. As John Zarella told you, things are beginning to die down in that region. But now the question is, what happens? This, of course, the worst case scenario for the southeastern U.S. A hurricane moving toward a major metropolitan area, moving through Miami or just to the south of it, moving across Florida into the Gulf of Mexico and then taking aim on the Gulf Coast. The National Hurricane Center has issued a hurricane watch now for the Gulf Coast from Mobile, Alabama, all the way over to Sabine Pass, Texas. And the timing of this system would put it across the Gulf Coast region within about 40 to 48 hours, meaning sometime early Tuesday morning, or Wednesday morning rather, local time. The system, of course, has been a rapid mover, and it has been across south central Florida so quickly it only took 5 hours to pass across the southern part of the state. Let's look at the national radar composite now. This is a composite of different radar sites over southern Florida, and you see the eye where it's much easier to recognize, but then you see it still. This is Marco Island right in here, so you see it right out to the south. Naples is in the area, and of course it seems to have passed just around Everglades City and in that region, producing the heavy downpours and of course the storm surge Circulation, of course, counterclockwise around the system, so the storm surge across the north half as it moved across the east coast of Florida, but now coming around on the south half, it'll probably get extreme southwestern Florida with that storm surge right around the center being the heaviest region. The Florida Keys have been bothered in the northern end, but really not the south end. In fact, at this point, it looks like Key West has not seen any rain at all, although Fort Myers has seen some thunderstorms and strong and gusty winds, and of course you heard about those strong winds currently along the west coast of Florida. On the east coast, things are, as I said, beginning to ease up. I'll be back with more on Andrew and also more on the weather around the world. Right now we go back to Bobby Batista.
All right, Valerie, thanks. Well, our national correspondent Bonnie Anderson is in Homestead, Florida, which is about 25 miles southwest of Miami, and the city where the eye of the storm passed over at about 5 a.m. this morning. Bonnie?
We are actually about 1 mile north of Homestead. It's taken us, about an hour and a half to drive the 20 miles from Miami to this point. What I'll tell you is the last 15 miles of this road, of this ride along US 1, the main road, we have not seen a building that was not destroyed. We're talking business after business after business, roofs ripped off. We've seen cars turned over and thrown, probably blocks. We've seen trucks turned over. All the power lines are down, crossing the road. Gas stations with the metal and the pumps twisted as though they were pretzels. We're now at a fire station in Naranja, which is about a mile north of Homestead, and here they have some injured people here because they cannot even get them to a hospital. It is continuing to rain, although the rain is not very heavy now. However, there are so many trees down, so many power lines down, that fire rescue and the people here at the fire department are treating the people as they can and hoping soon to get some sort of relief. Reporting live from Naranja, I'm Bonnie Anderson.
And we will take a break here and continue with our coverage right after this. President Bush today promised federal aid and expressed sympathy for Floridians hurt by Hurricane Andrew.
I just very briefly want to express my heartfelt concern to the people of Florida on this devastating storm. Apparently it's one of the worst in probably the worst in 6 decades. We have already got 2 FEMA teams, that's the government emergency teams down there in Florida. I will be declaring today that Florida is a disaster area.
The president says he will stay in touch throughout the day with officials in Florida to see that emergency assistance and related efforts run smoothly. About 1 million people were told to evacuate South Florida before Hurricane Andrew hit. Northbound highways were packed yesterday. Governor Lawton Chiles ordered the Florida Turnpike Authority to stop collecting tolls in order to keep the traffic moving. Many South Floridians are retirees, and some were not too happy with their local officials.
We heard on the television. Get ready, go, 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 evacuate, go, go, go. How about the people that don't have a car, that are old and sick? What can they do?
You want to stay here? No.
This was terribly organized this time. The county, the city, the whole business was very bad. That's my opinion.
I'm taking a taxi and I'm going away.
For residents who could not or would not get out of town, dozens of shelters have been operating throughout the region.
The storm hit land first in the Bahamas, where 4 people reportedly were killed. Andrew roared through the northern islands of the Bahamas, with the eye passing over Eleuthera. The whirling winds measured at a steady 120 miles an hour. Winds toppled trees and ripped and tore through island structures. Several dozen homes destroyed. Near Nassau, huge waves crashed against the coast. The storm surge flooded the streets. However, Nassau escaped with very little physical damage. And World Day continues in a minute. Going to get the little latest now on where Hurricane Andrew is headed from Max Mayfield, who is in the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables. She joins us on the phone.
Good morning.
Where are we and where are we headed here?
Okay, as you know, the center of Andrew slammed into Dade County about 5 a.m. this morning. The main concern right now is on the southwest Florida coast. The center is about 45 miles south of Naples. We've had a wind report of a gust of 100 miles per hour in the last few minutes from Naples, so it's really Naples, the Marco Island area, that is of greatest concern right now. In addition to the wind damage, they could have 5 to 8 feet of water piled up in the return flow from the hurricane. Usually, when a hurricane moves over land, it will weaken some. This is a Category 4 hurricane. When it hit the East Coast, it certainly has lost some intensity, but now that it's back over the open Gulf of Mexico, it could go ahead and regain some of that strength.
All right, the return flow, that's the backside of it coming around and up the clockwise, right?
Exactly right, and this is such a strong hurricane that they do have some areas over there where that water could pile up to 5 to 8 feet.
All right, the future tracking, Max, can you tell us anything about that? Who's in danger in the Gulf?
We do think it will gradually turn more towards the west-northwest during the next 24 hours. It's still moving along right now about 18 miles per hour, so the course of least regret was to go ahead and put up a hurricane watch, which we did at 9 a.m. from Mobile, Alabama to Sabine Pass, Texas. There are some areas in there, in particular New Orleans, that need a lot of time to start moving people, so we certainly we don't know exactly where it will go once it gets in the Gulf, but we do think it will turn a little more towards the west-northwest.
How about its power, intensity over water? What's happening?
Well, you know, we could be down to Category 3 hurricane now, but it's still around 36 hours away from our projected landfall point, so that's still plenty of time for it to regain some of that strength. So we're still looking at a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico.
All right, thank you, Max Mayfield from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, a suburb of Miami. Bobby?
See now.
What we're seeing is tremendous devastation, and by that I'm telling you, city officials are saying that 90% of the buildings of the community has been severely damaged. This means roofs collapsed, windows out, walls collapsed. There is severe damage. They're also estimating 60 to 80% of the businesses are totaled. That means that they cannot be repaired, and that basically they're going to have to start anew, bulldoze and start anew. There is only one phone line going in and out of town. They have managed to get through to the governor. The governor is heading down here in a chopper to assess the damage. Along with him will be Senators Graham and Connie Mack. There are 100 guardsmen on the way here, we're told, as well as 32 police officers, a disaster team from Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the police here and other officials are trying to get into some of the outlying areas of Homestead, to some of the trailer parks where they do fear the damage is far more extreme. At this point, there are no reports of casualties, but they fear that this could be because of the complete lack of communication. But at this point, again, no casualties. Reporting live, I'm Bonnie Anderson.
Bonnie, with this kind of severe damage, were the shelters able to withstand this? And the folks could be in for a long haul at those shelters then, might have to stay a lot longer than they thought.
My understanding is that most of the people here who were told to go to shelters had to go to shelters much further north. The folks who stayed here in their homes are the ones that are around the streets now, and there are people who are out. In terms of shelters, again, to my knowledge, there aren't any shelters here because this was not a safe place to stay. We are at City Hall. Some of the walls are blown out. Police, again, and the city manager are trying to dig out cars from the rubble. The police department lost a number of different cars, but the building itself is intact. And they are just basically regrouping and trying to get out and help the citizens and trying to get their communication links back up.
From Homestead, Florida, Bonnie Anderson, thanks very much. Also on the phone with us, Mike Arnold. He is with the Collier County Emergency Services. Mike, what do you do now?
Well, we're just on the downside of the storm here ourselves. We're starting to do our planning in terms of getting some damage assessment teams out on the street and see what we're going to have to deal with. I think we're, of course, several hours behind the Homestead area that we just got the report on, and we're going to be getting into the same damage assessment needs and evaluation as they are right now. But at this point in time, we have not gotten out there yet because we need to let the wind die down a little bit further before we feel safe in putting our people out.
Okay, give us an idea of what cities your county covers.
Well, in Collier County, we only have two municipalities. One, of course, is the city of Naples, which is a community of about 30,000 here, and then Everglades City, which is located down the far southern reaches of Collier County, virtually on the edge of the Everglades itself. And Marco Island is another, not a city, but it's a key population center here. And Marco Island was evacuated, as was Everglades City. And we had very good response to the evacuation. Now, those are the two areas that we do not yet have any damage reports on, and those are the two areas that are going to be susceptible most to the storm surge we're expecting, since this storm has moved offshore now. We are expecting a storm surge of about 7 feet, so they are likely to experience some flooding here in the aftermath of the storm passing us.
Now, what can you see where you are right now, Mike? Are you able to look out and see what's going on right now?
I haven't been outside for a while here myself. I'm told that the winds are starting to die down, that during the height of the storm we were having only gusts up to just about 100 miles an hour. But I think now we've been dropped down to winds in the 50, 60 mile an hour range, and so we are definitely on the downside of the storm here.
Okay, all right. How well are you prepared if the storm should hit as badly as it's apparently hit in Homestead, Florida? Are you ready for those folks to be able to have to stay longer than they might have planned?
Well, yes, we are, but I think we're very pleased, because our early assessments here are that our damages are going to be nowhere near what they have been over there, but yet again, we still need to see what's going to happen with the storm surge and the flooding that will result from that in the Marco Island, Everglades City, and perhaps the coastal city of Naples areas. That's where we may have the greatest property damage, but we had very little precipitation out of it thus far, about 3 to 5 inches, which was fortunate in terms of flooding. And again, the wind damage, our earliest reports here are just we've hit down power lines, trees, and things of that nature. A few buildings that were under construction that have collapsed, which are mostly single-family homes. And that's the extent of our information at this point.
All right, from Collier County Emergency Services, Mike Arnold, we thank you for joining us very much. Right now, let's join our affiliate WSVN and see they're into their new newscast, and we'll join them and see what they're finding.
Unless you're fleeing people in the business that we're in, we're there to broadcast and try to help other people. So it's Mother Nature can be crazy.
And our emergency crews worked very well in getting people out. I mean, a lot of people decided at the last minute, oops, I'm going to go to a shelter. We had the buses running till like 8 o'clock at night. They ran fairly late. We had emergency crews going in and getting people out who couldn't get out, who decided at the last minute they wanted to get out and go to a shelter. And so the evacuation effort, I think, was superb in all of this.
There's one wonderful thing about a hurricane, and that is that it really gives you time to prepare. Unlike earthquakes and tornadoes that just come out of nowhere and when you least expect them, at least with a hurricane, if you act responsibly and if you're given and get enough information, you can do things that can save your life and save the life of your families. And I think this is a hurricane that, if nothing else, has proven just that if we do those things, we can't avoid it. I feel bad for the people of California or the people of Kansas who have to deal with earthquakes and tornadoes respectively, because they don't get this kind of warning. They're not told that you have 24 hours or 48 hours and you can prepare and you can do this or you can do that.
Sometimes with a tornado, you do get some warnings. I remember spending many nights in the basement waiting for a tornado and watching it develop and go overhead. So I mean, it does happen with the tornado, right, but not like this. Although looking back, if you could have redone it, did you do all you would have liked to have done to prepare for this? I know in my situation with my house, I didn't. For example, I didn't have enough time to take the awnings off. I don't know what happened, but I suspect I have no awnings when I go back home. That seems to be the case all over. Those who didn't take their awnings down lost them. I suspect that's what happened at my place. I would have reinforced the doors a little better. When I heard that it was going to be a Category 5 storm, I thought, I haven't done enough, there is no way. What I did to my place would not have withstood a Category 5 storm. Or at least
that it could have been, it had the possibility of becoming a Category 5.
That's right. We thought for sure it would be at one point.
At one point we were only 5 miles off from being a Category 5, and I remember thinking, boy, it's gaining strength, it's still got the Gulf Stream ahead of it. How can we avoid becoming, but I guess you have to take into consideration that anything can happen with a natural disaster, in other words, Mother Nature. Anything can happen, anything is possible. In some respects, the high-pressure ridge that was sitting above the area for so long was responsible for steering Andrew our way. Had we had a few bumps...
Some pretty dramatic pictures there, and some of the folks who live in that area in Miami from WSVN talking about what they did to prepare for Hurricane Andrew as we continue our coverage and watch what this hurricane does. We'll take a break here, and Cryer and Company returns in a minute.